She-Rag got me.
Clock now, it's the Los Angeles Chargers. It's the New Orleans Saints, now on the clock. It's the Detroit Lions, now on the clock. Next up, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are on the clock. It's now the Arizona Cardinals selection. They're on the clock. The Chicago Bears are now on the clock. The Panthers are on the clock. It's now the Vikings' turn. On the clock. The Baltimore Ravens now on the clock. Next up, it's the Dolphins on the clock. With the next selection, the New York Jets. On the clock now, the Seattle Seahawks. Next up, the Cincinnati Bengals are on the clock. On the clock now, it's the Green Bay Packers. It's now the Indianapolis Colts selection. The 49ers on the clock now. It's the Tennessee Titans now on the clock. The Atlanta Falcons are now on the clock. The New Orleans Saints are now on the clock. With the next selection, the Lions are on the clock. It's the Bucks now on the clock. now. The Chicago Bears are on the clock now. The Carolina Panthers now on the clock. The Cleveland Browns are now on the clock. On the clock now, the Baltimore Ravens. On the clock now, it's the Miami Dolphins. The New York Jets are now on the clock. Now the Seattle Seahawks are on the clock. The Bengals now on the clock. The Green Bay Packers are now on the clock. Next up, the Indianapolis Colts are on the clock. The San Francisco 49ers are now on the clock. The Tennessee Titans are now on the clock. On the clock now, it's the Atlanta Falcons. With the next selection, the Saints are on the clock. The Detroit Lions now on the clock. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are on the clock. And now, on the clock, it's the Arizona Cardinals. On the clock now, the Chicago Bears. It's the Carolina Panthers now on the clock. Next up, the Cleveland Browns are on the clock. The Baltimore Ravens are on the clock now. With the next pick, the Miami Dolphins are on the clock. The New York Jets on the clock now. Next up, it's the Seahawks on the clock. The Cincinnati Bengals are on the clock. The Green Bay Packers are on the clock. The Colts now on the clock. It's the Dallas Cowboys now on the clock. The Los Angeles Rams now on the clock. On the clock now, the Kansas City Chiefs. Now on the clock, the Los Angeles Chargers. Now on the clock, the Texans. The Las Vegas Raiders are on the clock. It's the Steelers now on the clock. The New York Giants on the clock. On the clock now, it's the Denver Broncos. The Minnesota Vikings are now on the clock. With the next selection, the Ravens are on the clock. The Miami Dolphins now on the clock. It's the Cleveland Browns now on the clock. The Baltimore Ravens now on the clock. Next up, it's the Dolphins on the clock. With the next selection, the Browns are on the clock. On the clock now, the Baltimore Ravens. On the clock now, it's the Miami Dolphins. The Cleveland Browns are now on the clock. With the next selection, the Cincinnati Bengals are on the clock. With the next pick, the Miami Dolphins are on the clock.